Excited. Hey there, everyone. I'm so excited for you to be joining me for this week's Money Chat, where I am going to be talking all about our mindset around being rich, being wealthy, and like kind of uncovering a little bit more of what's going on there. To really talk about like what I have coming up to work with me. And also, I think that this is such an important mindset focus when we are having our own business and wanting to build our own wealth. So let's jump right in. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Eleanor Prisco. I work as a money and mindset coach, and I am all about helping you achieve your level of financial independence and empowerment and figuring out what are the right strategies for you, what are the mindset blocks that we need to overcome and uncover. Just really diving in. So today we're focusing in on what is our mentality around becoming rich, really uncovering those aspects and like seeing kind of some of our own resistances to being perceived as a rich woman, right? Like being the rich girl, right? And so I think that there can be like a lot of sticky energy when it comes to being, kind of that, like so many different things, right? There's like the inner, like partying with your inner rich girl, like that bratty rich girl, right? But then there's also like, weirdly, you can either be a bratty rich girl or it's like you're a rich bitch, right? Like you're kind of stuck up and there's this like negative association, right? And then somehow everything changes once we use the word wealthy, right? Like the whole mentality and perception of someone changes when it's like, oh, but they're wealthy, right? That's totally different. But what we're talking about in all of these levels is having high levels of financial security, financial independence, money, right? We're all talking about high levels of money. And so I think it's really important as you are working, to build your business and expand in your mindset and the work that you do, that like you start to reflect on, oh, what are my perceptions of being perceived as a rich woman, as a wealthy woman, as this like, you know, person that has financial stability and independence, or is it like I have this perception that I'm disconnected from reality, right? And everyone else is going to perceive me that way, right? The same could be said about a dreamer, right? It's kind of very funny how like when we get to these different ends of the spectrum, we start to see a lot of like mirroring behaviors of like doubts or distrust, right? Of what's happening. And so I really want you to think through as you think through your financial goals, right? It's important for us to reflect on like, oh, what are my beliefs or perceptions that are bubbling up that might be getting in my way of showing up the way that I need to in my business or as a leader in my company to actually amass more wealth, right? Amass more money, because you also have to consider like what responsibilities would come into play if you made the money that you are working towards right now, or that you want to make or desire to make, right? It could be that like you actually have more employees, right? Which could be something that suddenly feels really overwhelming, but it also could be like, oh my gosh, I'm creating financial stability and security for other people, right? And I'm deciding to lead my company in a different way that like impacts people in a really positive way, that they have a fantastic place to work, right? You could be, oh, I'd lean into like philanthropy and like be able to help causes that are deeply important to me, right? Or I'd also be like buying a fancy like car. I would be buying a fancy handbag. I would be buying fancy clothes, right? Like you would buy the house of your dreams. And that can all sometimes feel sticky, right? And what this all comes back to, right, is like kind of a vilification that happens, I think, in our minds from a young age of like having wealth or having money, right? And so it's like, oh, am I going to be rejected by the herd? And so I really want to invite you into like, is that true? Because I think just like getting back down to like a basic human level of understanding that like we all want to be accepted, because like just as a human species, like, right, and you look at other animals, like it's very important to be part of the herd, right? Like survival happens in community, in a group. And so if you are experiencing having these big financial desires, but you are holding a subconscious belief that you will be rejected by community, you will be rejected by the herd when you achieve these things, it makes complete sense that you're self-sabotaging now, right? Like it's quite, like when you put it that way, it's like, oh, well, that was simpler than I thought. And so it's like, oh, let's actually examine, are you going to be rejected, or are you just going to be rejected by people that hold negative beliefs about people who are rich or wealthy, right? And does the amount of money you have really change who you are as a person, right? And so I think it's really important for us to reflect on these things and like examine, like, oh, is this actually what's going on? Like, are these things true with a capital T as we examine our mindset, right? Because I want to talk about how important our mindset is. Because I know on my own journey, right? Like my mindset was deeply impactful to how I showed up, right? And I had a lot of beliefs around perceiving being rich as very negative, right? And the ideas of it being a bad thing, right? And that rich people were bad people, right? It took me time to like understand that that wasn't true, but like not just to understand it on a conscious level, but like a subconscious level, and like have it understood in my nervous system, and understand that being in struggle like didn't make me better than anyone else, right? Because we can believe that like it's like, oh, well, I'm a different type of rich person, you know, like I struggle, I work really hard. And it's like, but do you have to, right? Like, is that actually something you need to be doing? Or is it just that that is something that you have taken on because you struggle to allow ease into your life, right? You struggle to allow it to be easy for you because you need some kind of justification as to the wealth that you have achieved in your business, right? Or in your life. And so we can find ourselves creating all of these little challenges, or all of these like kind of pitfalls, or all of these self-sabotages of making things more difficult for ourselves, because we in fact feel on a subconscious level uncomfortable with the money, uncomfortable with the wealth, uncomfortable with the ease. And so we can find ourselves creating problems, or not being willing to get support, or not being willing to, you know, actually experience the ease that we've been working towards in wanting to achieve financial stability, empowerment, and security. And so I think that when we start to reflect on what are our perceptions of how others will perceive me if I am seen as rich, right? If I am seen as wealthy, when we start to uncover that, we start to see how much and how deeply important it is to each of us as individuals to be accepted by the community, by the herd, right? And like have this community protection, right? And so what would it be like if in actuality, those fears that you have, those concerns, weren't a truth with a capital T, that they just actually were fears like that you absorbed from a young age, or from society, and like how they've presented wealth, and actually they don't have any truth in them, right? They were just stories being created through propaganda, right? And like pop culture and experiences. And so like when we start to examine that, and then you're like, oh no, that may be pop culture, but for real, like my tightest knit people would have a problem with it, right? And I want to ask you, like, is that true? Number one. And then number two is like, have you been happy about your friend's success, or your family member's success, or your loved one's success? Why would they then not be excited and happy for your success, however that may look, right? And I understand there's the navigation of dynamics of like being more successful than friends, or being more successful than a partner, or things like that, right? And I want to challenge you to actually think like, is that really true? Is it true that my loved ones would be upset with my success? And if it is, are you really meant to sacrifice yourself and be in struggle, and be in lack, and be in limitation, when you could be in ease, right? That you could be in stability, that you could be in independence, right? Like, is that really what you want to sacrifice in your life, right? When is that really like you're also like your responsibility to manage, right? When you're looking at loved ones or people in your life, and you're concerned about them having a problem with your bank account, right? And what it triggers within them. Let's be very clear, right? It's about what is triggered within them and how they perceive themselves, right? Because is it just, them realizing like, them getting confronted with understanding they had a belief that people of X, Y, and Z means couldn't make it to where you've made it, and you have now disproven that belief, it kind of is like, oh, wait, my beliefs aren't making sense. And so is that actually creating a challenge or triggering something within them for them to reflect upon? And is it your job to shrink yourself to be more palatable to them or to not trigger them into the next evolution of themselves? Now, I think that that's like a really important thing for us to reflect upon, because I think that there is a lot of challenges that come up with women, like women as entrepreneurs and women gaining financial success, because like, I don't even want to jump into like the entire storyline that happens of like from a very young age of like, oh, your significant other will be like triggered by you making more than them or something like that. Right. I think that that's like something that is like very archaic, but very present. Right. And so it's like, you should really ask yourself, oh my gosh, is that playing a part in how I show up in my business? Right. And, you know, show up for the money that I desire to earn and like the wealth that I want to create for myself. Right. So I think that as we're on these journeys as entrepreneurs and start to reflect and like think through, right, like what is it that we are looking to achieve? Because most likely we are looking to achieve big financial results, big financial goals and desires, and they come back to money. It's very important for us to reflect on like, who is this inner rich girl, right? That you have, like, uncover her, like start to understand, oh, you know, who is this inner rich woman, rich girl within me? What are her values? How does she engage with her money? What is she like, right? Like, what are the responsibilities that she has? And start to see if they align with what you desire, right? Because if you're holding this belief of what it means to be rich, of what it means to be wealthy, and then you have other desires, right, that totally do not align with that, right? If you're thinking like, oh my gosh, they have zero responsibility or they have a ton of responsibility, and you desire to have less responsibility and pressure on yourself and your business, then like, do you see how these are conflicting ideas? So it's really important to reflect on like, who is this inner rich woman? What do I believe just about a rich woman, right? What do I believe about this idea of what it means to like show up for my money, to be present? Like, what are the fears and doubts that I have projected onto the idea of being a rich woman, right? And how does that then align or impact the desires and me going for my desires? Because a lot of the self-sabotage or, you know, the freezing, the running away, the hiding, the not showing up, the lack of consistency, the unwillingness to receive support, all of those, right, come back to a wanting to reject the desire that we're working towards, right? Because it feels like something in our subconscious mind is saying like, that's unsafe, that's not okay, like we can't go for that, right? And so it's uncovering these aspects of ourselves of understanding, oh, like I have these beliefs around what it means to be rich, and I'm working towards amassing more wealth. I'm working towards increasing my revenue. I'm working towards increasing my salary. I'm working towards, you know, having a higher net in my business. I'm working towards growing this wealth. And yet my beliefs are contradicting the desires that I have, the beliefs on a subconscious level, right? Because on a conscious level, you can be like, yes, I'm totally worth, you know, like charging my worth and like going for what I want in my business and, you know, putting this next offer out there. And that's fantastic and amazing. And if you are not seeing the results that you want, it's important to reflect on, oh, what is my mentality around this? What is my mentality around allowing it to be easy, allowing it to be pleasurable, allowing to have this be a luxurious experience, right? That it doesn't need to be this exhaustive hard work, right? And that goes into a whole bubble around like our mentality around work and what work gets to look like. And kind of all of the things tied with that. But I really want to focus in on this idea specifically of using this language around like, what are your fears and doubts when you think of yourself as being rich? You know, like what are the fears and doubts that bubble up when you think of yourself as being rich, and how are those impacting how you show up to achieving the financial desires and goals that you have and are setting for yourself in your money, in your business, in your strategies, like all of these things, right? Because if these are not in alignment, if there is conflicting ideas, then it can lead to a lot of challenges in actually showing up the way that you want to in your business, right? Or for your money, right? And then you're always wondering, like, why am I self-sabotaging myself? Why am I not showing up? Why am I not, like accepting help, right? Like, why am I doing this all on my own? And it's like, oh, am I actually just very uncomfortable with being perceived as a rich woman who has it easy, right? When we know that like it wasn't easy to build your business. It wasn't easy to build my business, right? Like, we know those things, but the outside perception may be different. And it's about understanding that sometimes the outside perception doesn't matter, right? Like how people perceive or think, like assume your journey was in your business or building your financial success, right? Like whatever they may be assuming about what your journey was, that may not matter, right? It's about like letting go of that and being willing to then share transparently about what your journey has been, like being willing to like give people a peek behind the scenes and be like, actually, like it took me years of like having $0 months repeatedly. I know that was definitely my story. It took me time. And then it wasn't until like I actually implemented the feminine finance methodology that I started seeing stability and consistency, right, in my business. And I actually was able to, and it was because I threw out other people's definition of what it meant and what would happen if I became wealthy or rich or financially stable. So, and leaned into my own definitions of it. So if you're wanting to uncover those definitions, if you're wanting to dive deep into this work, then let me know that you're interested in Rich Girl Summer, because I'd love to share the details with you about it. And I see a comment question. So the question I'm having come across is, what about fear of more success equaling more things to manage? Ooh, such a good one. More employees, maintaining multiple properties, etc. Yes, this is such a good one, right? This is such a good comment of like, how do you handle this? How do you handle a fear of like, well, I'm going to become more successful and all that's going to come with it is more problems, right? More management problems, more managing properties, managing people. Like I already am maxed out at my capacity. Like, how can I take on more, right? And I would say there's two things here, right? Number one, it's important continuously for us to digest, right? And so like continually digesting the good that's happening is a very, very important step to do, because it's almost like you're eating ice cream, right? And you keep eating ice cream and you keep eating ice cream. And then you're suddenly like, oh my God, I feel so sick. Or you're eating a really, really rich chocolate cake. That's probably mine, with like a raspberry jam. And like you're eating it and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so good. This is so good. And then you're suddenly like, oh my God, I've had 3 slices of cake and now I feel very ill, right? And you don't feel good, right? You had too much of this good thing. That does not mean that like we can have too much of a good thing and then like can't have any more, right? So I think there's a couple things. Number one is digestion. This means like taking up space with people that you care for and like actually celebrating yourself, like digesting all of the good, like talking about the good that you've been doing, the good that's naturally coming to you, the good that's happening in your business, the good that's happening in your life, and really honoring that and just taking up space. For some people, that looks like showing on social media, like the positive that's happening. Other people, it's intimate conversations with like their close-knit circle, right? It could be also conversations with your partner and like implementing like consistent standing times where you reflect and share like the work that you've been doing on yourself, right? Or the work that you've been doing on your mindset, or the work that's been happening in the business, right? Or even having opportunities with your team to celebrate the good that everyone has been doing, right? So like number one, digestion is key, right? Because then it can feel like all of this success feels like more and more work, number one. Number two, I also want to, there's actually going to be 3. Number 2 is, I think that we automatically assume that like as expansion happens, right? Like when it rains, it pours. This idea that like as expansion happens, it's like all of a sudden, all of it comes very rapidly at once. And then we go into a contraction. And I want to actually invite you into an alternative perspective here, and to actually see, instead of it going into a contraction, actually seeing this as a new plateau where you're regulating to this higher level of more, right? And so it is going through this idea and this concept of like, oh, we're not contracting. This isn't a problem. This is regulating to this new plane that we are evolved to, that we are at, right? So I talk in the concept of moving up, right? Evolving. Other people, what resonates with them is going a deepening of themselves, all work. But that's like kind of one of the concepts, right? The third thing of what about the fears of success equaling more things to manage, like more employees, more properties. The third thing that I want to say there is asking yourself, are you sustainably handling your business right now, or your properties right now, or whatever it might be, right? In the sense that, and this is going to need to be like a big reflection moment, right? You may have a come to Jesus moment where you're like, oh, I am not implementing sustainable strategies. Therefore, I need to implement them so that this fear of like having more kind of dissipates and I start to see the truth of the matter, right? Because you want to be able to navigate and manage where you're at now, right? Because if you're feeling underwater, you truly do need to look and assess like, oh, where am I at now with my employees, right? Like, how are we handling the management right now? How are we handling the team right now? What are strategies that I need to put in place, or who do I need to look to as an expert to help me assess how to better implement strategies so that this stays sustainable, right? Because I think that this is a big thing that we can get caught up on, is like expanding capacity. And I do think digestion helps with this, of expanding our capacity to hold more. And it's about being able to think through like, oh, okay, can I really take on more? And I'm struggling with the managing right now. Is like, okay, what is feeling unsustainable? Asking the reflection question of what is feeling unsustainable right now with your current team, with your current business, with your current offers, with your current sales like cycle, with your current properties, right? And what ways can we automate that? What ways are there systems out there to automate that? Are there new hires that need to happen? And like, are there simpler ways to like manage these properties or people or expectations? And it might be that you do need to hire, right? You need to hire someone to help. And the big thing that comes here is like the fears around, like, automatically the next domino that falls is like the fear on investing in yourself, right? The fear on, oh, like, what is like, that investment is too much and like I can't take that risk. And you need to ask yourself, okay, can you give yourself then a timeline of how long you're willing to make this investment to figure out if it works, right? Because there are going to be moments in your business, especially as you grow and you take on more responsibility, where you need to assess your risk tolerance of like, oh, like, what is my risk tolerance for this? Like, what, like, and what is my financial tolerance for this as a business, to be able to take on this person that would potentially manage, right? That would be managing these people. And like, I would be able to take a step back and they would be able to report to me, right? Because I do think that there's an importance for us to note here of like, as you grow, it is important to start learning how to manage people, how to create specific team dynamics, how to set up like company flows, like hierarchies, company hierarchies. And I think that many times we can think that it's like, oh, well, we don't have money to make that hire. And the thing is, you probably have a like 3 to 6 month runway to make the hire. And it's just going to be very important that you increase revenue within that time. But the thing that you're going to need to actually assess is like, oh, well, we have this runway, and it just means that we need to have a return on investment by that point. It's like, oh, we need to increase our sales by 5K a month in 6 months. Like, absolutely, to make sure to cover this risk, like this investment in the business and in my mentality and my sanity, right? In my mental health. And I think that's a really important distinction that we need to make as CEOs, and like really assess in our decision making, right? And that can come into, right, again, what we believe like a rich girl or rich woman gets to experience, right? Because it could be that you're literally like, oh, well, like I'm not that rich person that has zero responsibility and is just like buying designer handbags and like, going out and like having a glass of wine in the middle of the day, right? Like I'm not that inner rich girl, right? Like I'm not this one that has no worries, right? And so we pile on the worries, we pile on the stress, we pile on the concern, we pile on the fact that we're unwilling to accept help, we're unwilling to let it be easy because we're holding this belief that it's like, oh, well, like I'm not that rich woman, right? Like I'm not her. And so it comes back again to this assessment of like, what do you think a rich woman is, right? Because if you want to build revenue, if you want to have a different income, if you want higher levels of security, financial independence, security, and like freedom, you will gain money, you will gain wealth. And so we need to uncover what some of those sticky feelings might be about that inner rich woman. So with that, I'm so happy you were able to join me for this week's money chat. It was absolutely delightful. If you want to join me, I come here every week and drop a new video. If you want to watch it live, just come watch me over on Instagram. And with that, if you want to know the details of the Rich Girl Summer program that I am creating right now, I'm so excited about it because I think it's going to provide a lot more ease into the summer schedule. We are throwing out the worry and concern about, call times and missing calls and needing to reschedule with all of the very full summers that we have. And we are leaning into a one-on-one container of Voxer support. And I would love to give you all the details on that. It is 3 months. We are going to be focusing in on these themes for your mindset around flirting with luxury, around honoring your desires, around uncovering this inner rich woman, and that next level wealthy woman and the financial strategies she's taking action with. So if you want to know the details, I'd love to share them with you. Just send me a quick DM, and I'll see you next week. Bye.